Hello guys, Blagaga here, and it's finally time for another sneak peek guide, this time for Flames of Destruction. The sneak peek is gonna be on this weekend, April 22nd and 28th, and even if you don't have a single Yu-Gi-Oh card, you can go there and have some fun. In this video, I will help you win your beautiful Topologic Brisbane playmat that you can see right now on screen. For all of you who never watched any of my guides before, here's a little overview including timestamps so you can quickly jump to the section that interests you the most. First, I will explain what a sneak peek actually is, how to attend it, the course of actions, and all the other necessary information that you need to know. Of course, this section is only for people that never attended Yu-Gi-Oh! Sneak peek before, just want to have some fun on this weekend. Next, I'm gonna give you some general advice for sneak peeks. For more experienced players, this is just a friendly reminder, but for beginners, it's a must watch. Next, I'm gonna give you some specific advice about the sneak, nice statistics about the set, Flames of Destruction, overview of stats, and so on. Next, a very important section, absolute must watch. We're gonna take a short look at all the win options and basically the best cards from this set. And if you don't have the time to watch the entire video, at least watch this section, it's absolutely worth it, trust me. It's important to point these cards out because I'm gonna mention those cards later on in the video a lot when we talk about other cards. And then, as always, my favorite part, we're gonna take a look at all the 100 cards in depth and I'm gonna show you how to use them and how to play against them. So yeah, that's it. Let's begin. What is a sneak peek? The sneak peek is a special tournament that is always on the weekend before a new major booster set is released. But instead of using your own cards, you use cards from the new booster set. Not only is this a good opportunity to get your hands on the new cards first, but you can also go there if you never played Yu-Gi-Oh! Before. If you don't have cards, it doesn't matter. So what happens on a sneak? First of all, you have to pay the entry fee of 20 bucks. This seems a lot, but in return you get 5 booster packs from the new set Flames of Destruction, plus a promo card in ultra rarity. For Flames of Destruction, their promo card is called Monster Reborn Reborn. You see it right now on screen. Afterwards, you have around half an hour time to build a deck of at least 20 cards. You can also use the promo card and you can use as many duplicates of cards you pulled as possible. Even if you have like 4 or 5 copies of a common, you can use all 5 copies, don't worry. All cards that are not in your main deck are treated as your side deck. But very important, it's forbidden to trade any cards until the event is over. Afterwards you play a few rounds of Swiss. How many depends on the amount of participants, and the best will have a top 8 KO tournament. The winner will obtain this brand new playmat with the cover monster Topologic Brisbane. You see it right now on screen. The more people play on the tournament, the more mats will given out. Important, play till the end. Very often mats will even given away to random players at the end of the tournament. So even if you didn't do that well, there's still a chance that you can get a playmat. If you have an additional questions, by the way, on Sneak, just ask me in the comments below and I will do my best to answer you as quickly as possible. So now that you know about the event itself, let's talk about the general advice, the do's and don'ts of the sneak. This section is mainly for beginners and just a friendly reminder for more experienced players. Advice number 1, winning by decking out is a thing on the sneak, especially because there is a monster in the set that cannot be destroyed by battle. Monster removal is very rare, so you might want to consider playing 21 or 22 cards or even more so that your opponent decks out first. Advice number 2, sneak peeks are like old school Yu-Gi-Oh! So monsters with high attack, removal and feed presence is everything you need to care about to win this event. Sure, card advantage is not bad, but normally the person who has a stronger monster on the field wins the duel. Advice number 3. Bring something to eat and to drink. The event is very long, around 5 to 6 hours. You will spend a lot of time waiting and sooner or later you will get hungry and thirsty and you will not be able to focus on the game in that state. So you might make stupid mistakes because of that. Just avoid it, bring something to eat and to drink. Advice number 4. Read the cards. I know this sounds like a really stupid advice, but there are also small details on every single card, and even in my 100 card in-depth review I cannot just go over every single sentence. So just read the cards. You have 30 to 45 minutes to make your deck anyways, so just read the cards carefully. If your opponent summons the monster that you haven't seen before, just read it to make sure that you know everything you need to know to not make stupid mistakes, especially in the first 1 or 2 matches that you're gonna have on this day. There are a lot of people that are very inexperienced, and you can take advantage of that by simply staying focused and not making stupid small mistakes. Advice number 5. Here's a small checklist for you. Do you have your pen, a piece of paper, a coin, a dice, a calculator, or your smartphone, sleeves, and a playmat? So 6th and last advice, don't play too many high-level monsters or situational cards. Try to focus on level 4 or lower monsters. Trust me, you don't even need that many spell and trap cards on a sneak peek. I would recommend to use 10 to 15 level 4 or lower monsters, 3 to 4 level 5 or higher monsters, and only like 3 to 5 spell or trap cards. And now we come to the actually interesting parts of this guide. The other things are more for beginners. Now we come to specific advice about Flames of Destruction. So, specific advice number 1. The attack values of a level 4 or lower monster on the sneak is pretty low. There's hardly an attack value for low level monsters on the sneak that I would call average. But if I had to choose a value, I would go for 1500 or 1600. In fact, there are only a few monsters with more attack than that, but therefore they are all pretty good. When it comes to defense, it's kinda the same. There are only a few good defensive monsters, but 1800 defense seems to be the average defensive value for this sneak. By the way, the biggest defensive wall for the level 4 or lower monsters is 2100. Advice number 2. Apart from low level monsters, 2200 and 2400 are very important values. With 2200 attack, you can attack over any level 4 or lower monster. With 2400 attack, you are at the top of the food chain. The biggest monster on the sneak has 3000 attack, and 2500 is the highest defensive stat, so overall the sneak has not a lot of strong monsters. Advice number 3. Don't use spell and trap destruction on face down cards. There are some very powerful continuous spells and traps that you rather want to hit than face down cards. And there's another thing. There is one card that if you destroy it and it's face down, you can actually lose the game. That card is called Waking the Dragon, and if it's destroyed by an opponent's card effect, your opponent can simply special summon any monster from their deck or extra deck. So in other words, you're probably gonna lose the duel from there on out. So be very careful by destroying your opponent's face down spell and trap cards. Advice number 4. Like Extreme Force, there are a few cards in the set that take advantage of column mechanics. In general, the middle column is probably the safest one. All the other ones are a little bit more dangerous. Spell and traps are also very safe in the extra deck monster columns, and the most left and the most right ones are probably the most dangerous for spell and traps. Monsters are not that safe besides in the middle column, but there aren't that many cards that take advantage of column mechanics, so in general I wouldn't say it matters that much, but if you can avoid it, just play in the middle column and then probably the monsters in the most left and the most right column. Also try to make sure not to put spell and trap cards in the same columns that you already control monsters in, and the other way around. Advice number 5. Simply play all the extra deck monsters you pull from your packs. Again, there is this trap card that allows also you, if you have it, to special summon any monster from your extra deck. So if you have that card, even the most useless extra deck monster can actually be summoned and can potentially win you the game. So, I mean, you don't have a downside from playing basically any link monster that you pull from your packs. And that's already with my specific advice. Not that much to say about that set. Everything else is probably too detailed for now. Again, we will talk about all 100 cards in detail a little bit later on. But let's move on to the next point. Let's talk about all your win options and removal options. Important, I will only talk about those cards briefly so that you already are familiar with them later on during my entire set review. Because those are the best cards, I will mention them later on anyway, but you need to know them because they will come up a lot when I talk about a lot of different cards. The first important card is Sneak Grenade Buster, a hiking 2500 beatstick that can be special summoned and has a powerful quick effect. Very dangerous card. Next, Goki Bear Hug. a solid 1-3-bit monster with pseudo removal effect, and it's also searchable. Next we have Tindangle Trinity. This card cannot be destroyed by battle, and yes, this is a common, so expect this card a lot. Deck out is 100% a thing on the sneak thanks to this card. Next up we have Magnite Avram, the strongest level 4 monster in the set. Then we have World Legacy World Lands, the strongest monster with 3000 attack and with a powerful hand trap effect in addition to that. Then we have a few element subbers. Element subber La Pauila, I hope I pronounced that right, is a level 4 monster with the best defensive capabilities of 2100 in the set. Element subber Mole, who is another very strong level 4 with a very powerful quick effect. Then we have Element Subber La Pauila Mana, another strong 1-3-bit that can be special summoned from your hand and also can kind of make your other Element Subbers indestructible. Then we have new Elemental Lord with a built-in Raigeki effect. After that we have Jairo Invader, probably the most dangerous card on this entire sneak. I probably have to dedicate like 5 minutes to this card because this card is actually pretty skillful and requires a lot of experience to use correctly. So only use this card if you can think ahead. This is not really a card for beginners. Next up we have Iron Dragon Tiamaton, a powerful hand trap that can destroy multiple cards in the same column. Then we have the Knightmares. Those are very powerful link monsters. Knightmare Cerberus, Knightmare Phoenix and Knightmare Unicorn. All those three have more or less generic removal options on the sneak that can help you out a lot of dangerous cards. Next we have a very strong feat spell called Palace of the Elemental Lords. This is probably the most broken card on the sneak. I will talk very in depth later on in this guide about this. And last but not least, Waken the Dragon, a powerful card that if it's destroyed by your opponent allows you to summon any monster from your deck or extra deck. I will later show you how to use this card more consistently than you might think. More into those cards later in my detailed 100 card review. As always, all the 100 cards will have a colorful border. The color will immediately show you how good the card is. The completely useless cards are on tier 5 and have a black border. Don't play those cards. Then we have tier 4 cards and those are red. Those are pretty bad and situational cards. A few of them might be playable, but only if you have the right setup. Tier 3 cards are yellow and are probably the most average cards. Those are monsters with 1500 attack or 1600 defense or some decent spell and trap cards, but nothing too special, but playable. Tier 2 cards are green and those are already pretty good. If you see a green card, 90% of the time you can basically immediately put it into your deck. Those are low level monsters with very good stats, for example, or very generic good spell and trap cards. Then we have tier 1 cards. Those are basically the strongest cards on the sneak. They are blue and kind of break the rules. They work around a lot of threats and are overall very strong and versatile. You should 100% be familiar with those cards or otherwise you will have a tough time on the sneak. And then there are the tier 0 cards. There are actually a few in the set and those cards are ridiculously broken. If they hit the field, you basically just instantly win the game if you control them, or lose if your opponent has them. So they are really unfair. Again, there are only a few, but again, those cards, you should really be familiar with them. And last thing before we start going through all the 100 cards, most of these cards are in Japanese because the English cards have a very low resolution, and obviously it's easier for me to prepare for this kind of video because it takes some time to make this guide. But finally this time the English names and rarities are leaked early, so I can actually include them and the English names should be right. And for the first time ever we actually have the rarities next to the names of the cards. So enough talk, let's finally start with my review of all 100 cards. So the first card is a scale 9 pendulum monster called Kaiden Kendo Spirit. By writing the script, sadly no picture is available for this card. I really hope this changes, but normally I would give this card a yellow border. So this would be a tier 3 card. So this card returns to the hand if you normal summon it like any spirit. If you want to prevent this effect from happening, you want to special summon it instead, which is actually pretty hard because to pendulum summon this, you need 2 copies of this card and a low level scale. and there are only 3 pendulum monsters in this entire 100 card set. But if you normal summon this, you can send pendulum scales your opponent controls in the same column as that pendulum scale to the grave. I don't think this effect is very strong because it requires too much setup and is too easy to dodge. But I mean, removal is removal, and your opponents probably didn't watch this guide. So to simply avoid this effect, don't summon a monster in the most left and most right column, and especially don't summon a monster there and use a spell and trap card in the same column, because otherwise your opponent can blow up both. Next up we have Proton, a level 1 normal monster with really awful stats. Yes, it might be cute, but I would only recommend playing this card if you pull the Grenade Buster. More onto this card in a minute. The same basically counts for our next card, Prompthorn. Yes, in theory this card has an effect to tribute another Cyber monster to summon multiple Protrons from your deck for a link summon, but there are too many problems with that idea. You need to play a lot of weak monsters, you need at least 3 Protrons, and chances to pull those are very low, and you know what, just forget it. You only use Prompthorn if you have the Grenade Buster. Again, I am repeating myself here, but more onto that card in a second. Only 2 more cards to go. The next card is Backup Operator, slightly better stats than the last 2 cards, but sadly I have to be a broken record here and say don't play this card unless you pull the Grenade Buster, but don't worry, this is the last time I gave you that advice during this guide, I promise. Next we have a rather decent Cybers type monster. Link Streamer has an effect to special summon tokens that you can use for a link summon, for example. But way more important are its stats. 1600 attack is surprisingly good on the sneak, and 1800 defense is even better and can defend you against basically any level 4 or lower monster besides I think 2 exceptions. Very good defensive capabilities. I would highly recommend playing this even if you don't have the Grenade Buster. And finally we come to the card I mentioned the entire time. The Grenade Buster is a level 7 monster that cannot be normal summoned. Instead of normal summoning this, you just special summon by banishing 2 Cybers type monsters from your graveyard. It has 2500 attack and defense. Those are very high stats. And only 2 monsters in this entire set are stronger than this. Besides link monsters, and this card is basically even stronger because it can banish monsters with higher attack than this card until the end phase, so you can kinda lock stronger monsters completely out by banishing them over and over and over again, so your opponent needs 2 or more monsters that are stronger than this, which is nearly impossible. So how in the world do you counter this card? I mean, the card looks pretty OP. Well, it is. The by far best counter to this card is Nightmare Cerberus, which on summon can banish a special summon monster your opponent controls. But besides that, this card is very hard to deal with. Maybe try to use World Legacy Land's hand trap effect during the damage step. Last but not least, you could try to use Called by the Grave to banish your opponent's Cybers type monsters from the graveyard, so they cannot summon this card, or at least the summon of this card is delayed. Deck out also works, but yeah, in general this card is absolutely dangerous, and originally this was a tier 1 card until I wrote the script and realized, wait, there's not that much counterplay to this, maybe this is a really busted tier 0 card. Moving on to the less powerful but still playable card, Trickster Nightshade is a level 1 monster that if used for a link summon, special summons itself. This seems bad until you realize that there's a Link 1 Trickster monster in the set, which is also a common, so you can normal summon Trickster Nightshade, link summon Trickster Plume, that's the name of the Link 1, then summon Nightshade back and instantly go for a Link 2. That's pretty powerful, especially considering the amount of good Link 2 monsters in this set. So if you have a Trickster Plume and a good Link 2, or even Link 3, yes, this would be a card that I would recommend playing. Next, another Trickster monster, Trickster Mandrake. It special summons itself when it's discarded from the hand to the graveyard. There are a few cards in the set which trigger this effect. I will point the synergy with this card out once we get to those cards. Its other effect allows you to blow up a monster that an opponent's link monster points to. Okay, so this is obviously a very bad effect. As long as you know that this card exists, it's very easy to avoid this. Simply don't summon monsters in columns in which one of your link monster points to. It's that easy. So yeah, unless you pulled a lot of monsters that trigger this card's first effect, I would not recommend playing this. Next we have the last of the 3 Trickster effect monsters. Trickster Rodode is probably the best one. It has synergy with Mandrake and can discard it to bring back Plume back from the graveyard, which is pretty nice. Afterwards you can go into a Link 3, and in addition this card also has a nice burn effect, but I don't think this effect will ever be too useful on the sneak. But the main reason why this card is pretty solid are its defensive stats. 1900 defense is very good. In fact, that's the second highest defense of any level for a lower monster in the set. So yeah, pretty good card, playable. After the Tricksters, we obviously have to talk about the Gokis. Goki Octo Scratch seems weak because it's 0 attack and 0 defense, but it's actually kinda okay. If it's sent from the field to the grave, you can search another card, and we will talk about that card in a few seconds. It's actually pretty good. And its other effect can halve any damage you take. Doesn't matter if it's effect damage or battle damage, but in most cases probably battle damage. Important, it will not search if discarded for this effect, but still, this is fine. Both effects are decent. I would recommend to play this mainly if you have Goki Bear Hug. We will talk about this card directly after this. But if you use a search effect, keep an eye on your deck size. Be careful not to deck out first. And now we have Goki Bear Hug. This is a card you can search with Octo Scratch. This is one of the best 1-triples in the set. 2400 attack is very good. That's enough to get over any level for a lower monster. This card can also search Octo Scratch when it's destroyed. And on summon it can halve the attack of an opponent's monster until the end of the turn. Very good effect. Even if your opponent doesn't have a monster, this card is a big threat to him. 2400 attack again is very good. There are only like 3 or 4 monsters that can attack over this on this entire sneak. So overall a very good card, absolutely playable. The next monster is Defrag Dragon. This card also combos very well with Trickster Mandrake. You can discard a monster, for example Mandrake, to special summon this card from your hand. In the ideal scenario, you can triple this dragon afterwards for a solid 1-tribute monster, or like for example Goki Bear Hug, or go into a Link 2. On a sneak that's completely fine. If you control the strongest monster, you are on a good way to win the duel. That effect of Defrag Dragon allows you to special summon it back from the grave by banishing 3 monsters with the same name in your graveyard. I don't think this will ever be the case on the sneak, but it's a nice option nonetheless to get a +1 in the end game. So if you have a lot of tribute monsters, this card is absolutely playable because it enables you to take the advantage early on in the game. A card that was designed to work together with Defrag Dragon is Background Dragon. This card can special summon itself back from the grave, but you need a dragon in your hand to use this effect, for example Defrag Dragon. So overall this card isn't too great, especially considering its level. It's 5 and it only has 1600 attack and 1800 defense. 1800 defense is still enough for the sneak, and there are some potential there for Link 3 plays. But I don't think this card has the stats or the consistency to justify its usage, so decide for yourself, but I honestly wouldn't play this unless you put a lot of other Defrag Dragons. Now we come to probably the most annoying card on this entire sneak. Tindangle Trinity is a flip monster with a very long effect. The only thing you should know about this card is its second sentence in its card effect. If flipped face up, it cannot be destroyed by battle, and yes, this effect also triggers and protects itself when attacked. Play more than 20 cards. Remember, the last sneak Extreme Force was an absolute mess. I didn't enjoy it because there are too many deck outs. So this sneak won't be as bad as Extreme Force, but this card is still a big threat. Don't underestimate this card. If you don't pull any good cards, but you have 2 or 3 copies of this, I mean, keep in mind this is still a common, then you just play deck out. Play like 25 cards and go for a deck out deck. Just play slow, just set this card, your opponent will hardly get over this. So how do we play with and against this card? If you have a Tindangle Trinity and you simply want to use it for a tribute summon, then I would recommend setting it in the middle column. Now, there are other ways to use this to make even more use out of it, but you have to be a very experienced player and also need to consider all the column based cards in this set to really evaluate in the right situation where to set this card. Another advice on how to use this card: if you have 2 copies, keep one in hand. Unless your opponent builds up a field that would be able to defeat you in 1 turn, then set obviously the second one. A lot of removal on the sneak comes in form of unsummon effects, so if your opponent goes all in and you can survive his attack, you can simply set the next one during your next turn, and your opponent will probably not be able to deal with a second copy. But you also want to know obviously how to play around this card. Well, there are a few removal options in the set. Amass a lot of monsters on your side on the field, use your removal and go for an OTK. There is a trap card in the set which can bounce back a low level monster. That card is not what I would call a good card, but it's probably the most common and best counter to this card. In the late game, that card can help you return Trinity to your opponent's hand and then win the game from there. Also play more than 20 cards, obviously, that's also another counter to Trinity itself. Next we have Altergeist Multifaker. This card special summons itself from the hand if you activate a trap card. It can afterwards special summon an Altergeist monster from your deck. This card is only good if you activate a trap card during your opponent's end phase, and then you can tribute it basically or use it for a link summon during your turn. But even if you have this card, I would not recommend playing another Altergeist monster because this combo isn't that consistent and that strong. And the other Altergeist monster that we're going to talk about in a few seconds isn't that powerful. The only option will probably be if you have a very powerful Link 3 monster. Besides that, I would not play this card. And here we have the Altergeist monster that you can special summon with the effect of Multifaker, Altergeist Pixiel. I would not recommend playing this for its effect. There are only 2 other cards that you could get with this effect. The chances are very low that you excavate Altergeist cards, and even if you do, you thin your deck, which is not that great on the sneak. Only play this card if you have Multifaker and a good Link 3, otherwise this card is pretty garbage. Next we have the strongest level 4 monster in the set. Mech Knight Aphram has 2000 attack and can attack over basically any level 4 lower monster except one exception. This card is obviously really powerful because it puts insane pressure onto your opponent right from the start. Play every single copy of this card that you get from your packs. Now we come to the first secret rare from this box. Nightmare Corruptor Ipley is a level 2 that on summon can special summon a Link monster from your graveyard to your field. Preferable a Link 2. This is obviously really good for Link 3 play. So if you have a powerful generic Link 3 monster and pulled this card, or you pulled the card Nightmare Mermaid, then yes, play this. By the way, more information about Nightmare Mermaid later on in this guide. Otherwise, I would not recommend playing Ipley. And now pay attention, we come to the strongest monster in the entire set, at least attack value wise. World Legacy World Lands is a level 8 with 3000 attack. This card can run over any monster in the entire set. If you control multiple copies of this card, then both protect each other from being able to be attacked. And if any player summons a monster from the extra deck, that player gets a token. This effect is obviously a double-edged sword because your opponent can also make use out of the tokens for link summonings. That's okay because there's only one link monster in the set that could be a threat for this card, and it's a secret rare anyway. So last but not least, this card has a hand trap effect. You can discard it during an attack in which at least one link monster battles. Doesn't matter if the link monster is on your side or your opponent controls it. And then your opponent's monster's attack is reduced by 3000. That is very powerful. Nonetheless, in most cases, I would recommend playing this card on the field, so tribute summoning is, because this way, as a 3000 beat stick, you should probably win the game from there. Overall, World Legacy Lands is a very strong card with a lot of good ways to use it, a must play. Next we come to the element subbers. Those are warrior type monsters that can change their attribute while in the graveyard. The first element subber is element Hyena. You can use their effect to discard element subber to special summon back element subber from the grave, or to even special summon back elemental lord. Important, although this effect ignores summoning conditions, the elemental lord needs to be special summoned properly by its own effect first, otherwise you cannot special summon it back with Aina's effect. Again, I'm pointing this out because I am afraid that a lot of newer players and beginners will actually make this mistake on the sneak peek. Now, because of this restriction, Aina's effect isn't too strong, but 800 defense are already good enough as a nice offensive wall. Next we have Elemental by Makani. Makani has overall average stats and has a search effect for Elementabers. She isn't particularly good, and the search effect also tints your deck. Again, beware of tinting Trinity and deck outs. So I would only play this card if you have a lot of Elementaber support cards or this Link 2 monster Great Fly. Otherwise, don't play it. The next Elementaber is Elementaber Nalu. Nalu can recover Elementabers and Elemental Lord monsters from the grave by discarding one. I don't think a lot of players will have a lot of Elementaber monsters because they are more or less high rarity. If you are one of the lucky ones that has some of the ultra rares or super rares, then go ahead and yeah, play this. 1500 attack is also okay. A decent Elementaber is Malo. I would not recommend using his effect unless you have the Elemental Lord monster already in your hand and are almost ready to use it. But 1700 attack can be considered a high attack stat on the sneak, so that's strong enough in my opinion to recommend playing this. One of the best Elementaber monsters is La Pawila. This is a level 4 monster with the highest defense in the entire set, but that's not even everything. This card also has a quick effect who can negate spell and traps by discarding another Elementaber monster. La Pawila is probably one of the best first turn sets on the sneak. Very good card, a must play. In fact, this card could nearly be a tier 1 card with a blue border. But it gets even better. Elementaber Moleo is arguably the best of the level 4 or lower Severe monsters. 1900 attack is the third highest attack value of all the level 4 or lower monsters. In addition, he has a strong quick effect that can put opponents' monsters into face down defense position. Very powerful against cards like Goki Bearhawk, Magnite Avram or World Legacy World Lance. Don't waste this effect, you probably will not have a lot of Elementaber monsters to discard, so try to use this against the cards that I just mentioned. So those are the low level Elementaber monsters. A small reminder, again, all of them can change the attribute in the graveyard once per turn. And this is powerful to summon the Elemental Lord that's in the set or to use their support cards. Now we come to the Elementaber boss monster, Elementaber La Pawila Mana. Former known as Elementaber Willard, this card is really strong. 2400 attack and 2100 defense are very good stats for level 6. Even in defense, none of the level 4 or lower monsters can defeat this guy. Even better, you can special summon this card from your hand by discarding 2 monsters. Any monsters. It doesn't matter if those are Elementaber monsters or not. This also works with Trickster Mandrake, by the way, and can set up your graveyard in case you want to revive something. And in addition, if you use Elementaber monsters for this discarding effect, you can make all your Cyber monsters, including himself, unable to be destroyed by card effects, battle, or being unable to be targeted by opponents' card effects. In most cases, protection from battle and targeting effects would be your best choice. But sometimes protection from destruction can also come in handy, but the protection from battle is by far the best option, because you can also stall with this, and having a monster that cannot be destroyed by battle and can grant you a win by decking out and still has enough pressure with 2400 attack is insanely dangerous. So this is a very good card, but again, even if you can normal summon this, it's absolutely worth it, a must play. And now we come to the Elemental Lord. Phosphorage the Elemental Lord requires exactly 5 light monsters in the grave to be special summoned. And if summoned this way, you can destroy all your opponent monsters. If he's destroyed, you have to skip your next battle phase. But this downside doesn't really matter. 2800 attack and 2200 defense are excellent stats. If this card is summoned, it can deal with almost any threat on this entire sneak peek. So very powerful card. And yes, this isn't that easy to summon, but I mean, it needs some setup, but if you can get this out, it's insanely strong, obviously. So I counted the light monsters in the set, and even without the link monsters and the TCG and OCG exclusive, I counted 10. So overall, there should be enough light monsters in the set to use this card. You could also use link monsters, for example, Link Summon Trickster Plume. It's also a light attribute monster, so this is another way to get light monsters even faster into the graveyard. Now, countering Phosphorate is a little bit tricky. Probably the best card again is Nightmare Cerberus and also Gogi Bearhug, but you could also use Called by the Grave to banish light monsters from your opponent's graveyard to kind of prevent the summon or at least delay the summon of this card. So keep an eye on your opponent's graveyard setup. Another way to get a lot of light monsters rather fast in the graveyard would be to use Batteryman Solar. This monster has over decent stats of 1500 in both attack and defense. I would recommend playing this if you have multiple copies of it and if you have the elemental lore. So you can make use out of its milling effect and get light monsters into the graveyard fast. Also, by the way, if you control one and summon another one, you get a token that you can obviously use for a link summon or for a tribute summon later on during your next turn. I don't think this card is really that strong. It's mediocre at best. In some situations, it might be worth being played. Next up, we have BoxCat. This card has an effect to banish itself during the end phase to search continuous spell cards. I would not recommend using that effect. There aren't any very powerful continuous spells in the set that are worth being searched, but that's not the strength of this card anyway. So if you control no monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, and also its defense is pretty decent with 1800, so you can use this card for defense or simply special summon it out, then tribute for example, or use it for a link summon. So overall, a very good card with a lot of different uses. Very good for field presence. I would highly recommend playing this. Unlike our next card, Transfamilia is a card that I would not recommend playing. It's a level 1 with 0 attack and 0 defense, and it can move monsters to other columns on your field. This card has a very limited use, but that would be okay if it had some decent stats. But again, if you want to use this effect, you have to normal summon this, and it has just awful stats. So I would not recommend playing this because usage for this card is just too mediocre. There's nothing game breaking that you can do with this effect. Next we have a card with a really questionable TCG name. 3 Trolling Trolls allows you to summon Beast Warrior type monster from your hand or graveyard, but you cannot summon other monsters for the rest of the turn except Beast Warriors. Now before we go over this card and I judge it, let me point something out. What do you think is my biggest fear while making those guides? Tuners, because I easily overlook them, and this is one. And this stupid card is one of the reasons why I have to rewrite part of my script, because I just realized while finally finishing my video, oh wait, this card isn't as useless as I thought it would be. Great, now I have to reevaluate some other cards too, so these damn tuners. So I really hope I didn't forget another one. But enough off topic, back to this card. So being a tuner changes a lot because this card is an easy way to summon FA Dawn Trackster. Or if you have 2 copies of this card, you could also make use out of them and go into the link to Firefighting the Rumor Doll. Attack wise, not the strongest monster, but overall with a decent effect to destroy opponents' spell and trap cards. But I still would think that FA Dawn Trackster is overall the better usage for this card. I mean, it can also kinda get rid of opponents' spell and trap cards by negating them. So overall, if you can pull any of these 2 extra deck monsters out and make them work, then I would recommend playing this card, otherwise not. And now finally we come to the most fearsome monster in this entire sneak. The card that will either win you the game or probably lose you the game. Jajiro Invader, a really crazy card. So I'm kind of faced with a problem while talking about this thing, because it simply cannot easily be summed up. This card is a card that you should only use if you know what you're exactly doing, and also kind of judge your opponent's dueling skills. This is not a card for beginners. So what does it do? Well, you have to summon this card to the middle column, otherwise it destroys itself. And then whenever a monster is normal or special summoned, besides obviously being set to the field, this card moves closer to that monster's column. And if it hits another column with this effect, it simply destroys all other cards in the same column, even your own cards. How do you use this card and how do you play around this? You can use Waking the Dragon, because if you have Waking the Dragon, you simply set this next to column Jajiro Raider is in, and then 2 columns away from Jajiro Raider, you just normal summon a monster. Your opponent's invader will move closer to the monster and blow up the Waking the Dragon in the new column that's in, and that will trigger Waking the Dragon for you, and you can summon any monster from the extra deck or deck, which probably will win you the game. But that also means if you use this card, be careful. If your opponent has that trap card, this card can lose you the game. Also, this card can destroy your own spells and traps if you are not careful. If you want to use this card properly, you should probably normal summon this, and any monster you summon afterwards kinda will restrict you from destroying your opponent's cards, because your opponent should probably summon in the same column your monsters are already in, because then Jajiro Raider cannot move into those columns because they're already blocked by your own monsters. On the other hand, from you, that means that if your opponent controls a Jajiro Raider invader, you probably just want to set a monster in a column that your opponent already controls the monster in, because then he is not able to really make use out of the distraction effect from this card. Now you could also combo this card with, you know, the Pendulum Spirit monster, because you can kind of force your opponent to set cards in or use monsters in the most left or most right columns, far away from Jajiro Invader, and then you can kind of make use out of that Pendulum monster to destroy your opponent's cards in the most left and most right column. So those are some usages for this card, but I didn't even talk as in depth about this card as I probably could. Again, this is not a card for beginners. Be very, very careful while using this card. It can heavily backfire. And here's another card that takes advantage of the column mechanic, Iron Dragon Tiamaton. It can be summoned if there are 3 or more cards in the same column, and no, you don't have to summon this card to the same column those 3 cards are in, and if summoned this way, this card blows up all other cards in the same column, even your own one. So this is an ultra rare, so playing around this card is not 100% necessary. So here's a little advice on how to make best use out of this card. You can activate, for example, a spell from your hand in a column with 2 or more cards in it and simply chain Tiamaton from your hand. This makes it a little bit easier to summon. It doesn't really matter if your spell and trap is destroyed by Tiamaton's effect. So last but not least, as long as this card is on the field, summoned by this effect, other zones in this card's column cannot be used. This is really interesting in combination with cards like Jajiro Invader and the Pendulum Spirit monster. But I don't want to dive too far into the synergies, mainly because those are just too specific. And if that happens, you just have to judge for yourself. Again, this is some stuff that is more for experienced players on the sneak to make perfect use out of cards like Jajiro Invader and Tiamaton in the right situation. But yeah, very strong card with more or less generic removal. If you pull this card from your pack, play it. Next we have another tuner. Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion is a secret rare, and this is the new Ghost Girl hand trap. This card can be discarded to negate graveyard based effects. 1800 defense is overall very solid, and being a tuner makes FA Dawntraxer also very easy to summon. You only need another level 4 monster. I think overall it is probably even better to go for the Synchro Summon instead of keeping it in your hand, because the card only negates. And most of the time want to use this as a defensive wall with an option to go into Synchro Summon later on. But yeah, very good card, playable. Next we come to one of the short prints, Red Haired Hasty Horse, say that 5 times over again. Can be special summoned in an empty column, but it destroys itself if there are other cards in the same column. So it can attack directly. You can use this as a beatstick, you can use it for some nice damage to finish a game. You can trip it immediately after this card is summoned, or you can use it for example, a Link Summon in main phase 2 after you attacked. Or maybe if you simply want to avoid the destruction of this card, you can just Link Summon it away. So overall, a pretty good card with a lot of versatility. The other short print in the set is called Boy Cotton. But blah gaga, you lied to us. There's a level 4 monster with 2500 defense. It's much more than 2100. So why did you lie to us? Yes, that is true. Sadly, this card has 2 big downside effects. You take any battle damage involving this card, and also it returns to your hand at the end of the battle. In other words, this card is so bad, I almost gave it a tier 5 rating and a black border. This card was designed actually to give it to your opponent. But on the sneak, you can't really take advantage of this card. So don't get fooled by those stats. Don't play this card. So now we come to the Link monsters. And the cover monster is Topologic Brisbane. It's a very powerful, more or less generic Link 3 monster. This card can banish all spell and traps on the field, which is obviously a very powerful effect, and 2500 attack are also pretty good. Now, if your opponent summons this card, you could take advantage of the trap, Waking the Dragon. And yes, I mentioned this card a lot, but it's simply better than you might think. Set a special summon monster like Defrag Dragon to Brisbane's Link Arrow and then banish all your spell and traps on your opponent's spell and traps. You take some effect damage from Brisbane's effect, but this way you are able to summon any monster from your deck or exit the deck. You should be able to take the game from there. Just remember, if you summon a monster from your exit deck this way, don't summon it to Brisbane's Link Arrow, or otherwise it will trigger again because it's not once per turn. But overall, Brisbane is a very good Link monster, absolutely playable. Next we have Space Insulator, probably the most generic Link 2 in this set. This card lowers the stats of monsters this card points by 800. Even your own monsters, so be careful. So to avoid get hit by this effect, simply don't summon monsters in the extra deck monster columns. This way your opponent cannot summon this card and reduce your monster's attack by 800. Besides that, if you use this card's revival effect in your graveyard, then make sure that the Link monster this card is summoned to doesn't have Link Arrow downwards, or otherwise that the Link monster's attack will also be reduced by Space Insulator's own effect by 800 points. But yeah, this is a more or less generic, decent Link monster with some versatility effect that you can use and that might come up from time to time. Next up we have Trickster Bella Madonna. This card is pretty hard to make. You need 4 Trickster monsters for this Link 4, which is not impossible, but nearly. So okay, obviously if you get this card on the field and your opponent doesn't have a World Legacy lands, then you should probably win the game. After all, this card is more or less unaffected by card effects and can also do some nice burn damage. And it's also a very strong target for Waking the Dragon. The next Trickster Link monster is Trickster Bloom. I already talked about this card when we discussed Trickster Nightshade. There isn't too much else to say about this card besides maybe 2 small details or interactions. First, this card has an effect that lets your opponent draw 1 card. You can use this in the late game to deck out your opponent faster. I mean, it's optional, but hey, in the late game it might matter also. This card is by far the easiest Link monster to summon. So if you want to get some co-link monsters on the field to trigger some effects from cards that benefit from being co-linked, then this is probably the easiest way to do it. And here's the last of the 3 Trickster Link monsters. It's Trickster Delphinium. It requires 3 Trickster monsters, which is still pretty hard to get on the field, and its effect is the definition of specific. It has to attack, point to another Trickster monster, you need to have banished Trickster monsters, and your opponent needs a Link monster. Okay, so obviously you will hardly get this effect off. The attack boost is nice though, but overall for me this is just a 2200 beatsticks, which is actually surprisingly still enough, because 2200 attack is still enough to get over any level 4 lore monster on the sneak. Yes, except Boycotton. Next is Goki Master Ogre. The materials are 4 Goki monsters. Question: when do you control 3 Bear Hugs and an Octo Scratch? Answer: obviously never. So obviously just a decent target for Waking the Dragon. Otherwise you will probably not see this on the sneak. Next, the Altergeist Link monster, Altergeist Kidolga. This card can revive opponent's monsters. This effect seems strong till you understand that there are only 3 Altergeist monsters in the set. One is an ultra rare, one is really weak, and the last one is a trap card. So you need 3 Altergeist monsters, 2 to summon this, and 1 which is on the field and deals damage to trigger this card's effect. And that trap monster doesn't even have a very high attack stat either. So no, this is way too situational. I would rather sit on my trap monsters instead of summoning this. Next up we come to the Nightmare monsters. The Nightmare monsters are all Link monsters that have effects that trigger on summon. And they also have nice bonus effects when they are calling. Calling means that the arrows of Link monsters points towards each other. The first Nightmare is Nightmare Mermaid. This card can be summoned by using Nightmare Corruptor Ible or any of the other Nightmare Link monsters. The problem is that those monsters are stronger and more valuable than this. So besides using Ible, you probably won't be able to summon this at all. Its effect lowers the attack of all not calling monsters on the field by 1000, which is nice but not enough. So unless you get lucky and pull Ible as a secret rare, you can't really make use out of this card. The next Nightmare is Nightmare Goblin. From here on, all the Nightmares can be summoned by using monsters with different names, so they are more or less generic. The Goblin can grant you an additional normal summon and protects calling monsters from targeting effects. That all seems nice till you realize that this card only points to the sides, so you would need to go into at least one other Link monster first to really make use out of this card, and then an additional normal summon on a sneak doesn't really matter. So on a sneak, forget that this card is not good. But now we come to one of the better ones, and this card is a card that I already mentioned a few times during this guide. Nightmare Cerberus has a solid 1600 attack. It protects calling monsters from destruction by card effects, and on summon you can discard a card to banish an opponent's special summon monster. So this is one of the few cards that you can deal with a ton of powerful monsters like Decoronate Buster, Phosphoraged Elemental Lord, or some Link monsters. Again, I can't stress this enough. Don't waste this effect. Use it as a joker to counter your opponent's win conditions. Overall, one of the best Link monsters you can pull from your packs. Be happy if you get one. Basically the same I just said about Cerberus also applies to Nightmare Phoenix. Both are pretty similar. On summon, by discarding a card, Phoenix can banish spell and trap cards, and he protects all Link monsters from destruction by battle. Also 1900 attack are more than just solid. That is overall a very well-rounded card and should be fairly easy to summon. Don't waste this card. Use its spell and trap removal against face-up cards. Face-down cards are too risky. I mentioned this a few times during this guide. Or you might use this card as a beatstick to beat over your opponent's defensive walls. Next we have Nightmare Unicorn, which is probably the best Link monster in this entire set, but sadly this is a secret rare. So on summon, by discarding a card, you can shuffle a card on the field back into the deck. That is very powerful removal. While calling allows you to draw multiple cards during your draw phase, be careful not to take out. But normally after summoning this card, you should be in a leading position and take the game anyway from there on. Again, 2200 attack is strong enough to get over all low level monsters on the sneak. The last Nightmare is the boss mod, the Nightmare Griffin. He can set spell and trap cards from your graveyard. This is more or less just a 2500 beatstick, nothing too special. You have to decide if the 4 materials invested in this card are really worth it. And yes, this card can also negate the effect of special summoned monsters, but this isn't as strong as you might think on a sneak peek. But overall, this is just a 2500 beatstick that needs 4 monsters to make. In the late game, definitely an option, otherwise I don't think this card is too strong. Next we have the first useless card during this entire guide. Wind-up Zenmentans can only be summoned by using wind-up monsters. There are no other wind-up monsters in the set, so this can only be summoned by using Waken the Dragon. Maybe, but let's move on. And here's another secret rare. Vampire Cycle requires 2 zombie type monsters. There's a problem, they're only really bad zombie type monsters, or a secret rare or a ritual monster. So summoning this is nearly impossible. And it's not really worth as a Waking the Dragon target or just to be summoned. I mean, it's 1600 attack and its effect doesn't matter too much on the sneak anyway, so this isn't too great. So here's a link to monster I mentioned while discussing the tree trolling trolls, Firefighting Daruma Doll. This card gets attack for any beast, winged beast or beast warrior on the field, including itself, and it also can destroy spell and trap cards on both players' sides on the field. It's not the strongest or best Link monster in the set, and Nightmare Phoenix is way stronger overall, but if you really need that spell and trap destruction, this isn't the worst card ever. And the next Link monster is Great Fly, basically just a 1900 beatstick that decreases the attack of all Earth monsters by 400, increases the attack of all Wind monsters by 500. There are only a few Wind monsters in the set. Probably the best one is Red Haired Hasty Horse, which is a short print, so I don't think you will see this card too often on a sneak peek. I mean, if you have some wind monsters and you don't know what to play, then go ahead and play this. It doesn't hurt to put this card into the extra deck anyway. On to the spell cards. Cyber's Circulum seems like a very situational card. You need Link Monster in your graveyard, your opponent needs to control a Link Monster. But guess what? With all these more or less generic Link Monsters in this set, I think this card could actually be kinda useful, especially with Base Insulator. Or at least you could also consider siding this card if your opponent has a ton of Link Monsters and you go into a Space Insulator and later on you can destroy like a Troima Phoenix or Troima Cerberus. Again, all cards that you open from your packs that you don't put in your main deck are automatically treated as your side deck. Next we have Trickster Light Arena, a field spell with 2 effects. The first one allows you to revive a Trickster monster used for a Link Summon this turn, which makes Link Summon the Link 3 and Link 4 Trickster monsters a little bit easier, but still requires, in my opinion, way too much setup. But the second effect is the main reason why you want to play this. The other effect allows you to pin an opponent's back row down until the end of the turn and force them to activate it, or it's returned to your opponent's hand during the end phase. So this is a really safe way to get rid of your opponent's back row, even if it's just for a turn, but this is a decent card if you are afraid of back row. And another Trickster support spell. Trickster Bouquet is a quick play spell that returns a Trickster monster to your hand to increase the attack one of your monsters by the attack of the returned monster. This card is sadly absolute trash. Do you know why? Because most Trickster monsters in this set have insanely low attack value, and you really don't want to use the Link monsters for this effect and return them to the hand, so not a really good card. Maybe if you have the level 4 Trickster, but even if going -1 and sacrificing your field presence for a 1400 attack boost is mediocre at best. Also, it's really easy to play around this effect. Simply attack the Trickster monster first, and that's, in my opinion, just way too easy, right? Next, Goki Face Turn. You destroy one of your Gokis and special summon another one from your grave. So obviously you want to use this card to destroy Octo Scratch on your field and special summon Beerhug back from your grave. Beerhug will even get, in this case, its effect and half the attack of your opponent's monster if summoned this way, which is actually pretty good. So if you have all of them, Octo Scratch, Beerhug and this card, I would recommend playing it. Next we have World Legacy Corruption. If a Link monster is destroyed, you can summon a World Legacy monster from your deck. Or better said, it summons you World Legacy World Land straight from your deck. There's only one problem with this: it summons the monster in defense and lands has 0 defense. So don't play this. Now I'm going to teach you how to play around this card. So simply have 2 monsters on the field, destroy the Link monster first, and then attack the lands with the second one, which shouldn't be a problem because again, lands has 0 defense. And that's it, super easy, right? Next we have World Legacy Succession, formerly known as World Legacy Inheritor. You can special summon a monster from your grave to a zone a Link monster points to, even if it's your opponent's Link monster, by the way. Unless obviously it's the Link arrow of the cover monster, because in that case it will trigger and banish your monster simply and you will lose all your spell and traps, so don't make that stupid mistake. But yeah, pretty good card in combination with Trickster Plume because it's just so easy to summon, but overall a very, very good card. If used correctly, this card can turn the game. So now we're going to talk about the field spell of the Nightmare archetype. World Legacy Nightmare prevents battle damage you would take from battle involving co-link monsters, and it also can switch and move Link monsters on the field around. So on the sneak, this is not a card I would recommend playing. You will probably never be in the situation to control multiple Link monsters anyways, so at that point you should probably winning the game, and another card would be more powerful anyway. So, and now guys, pay attention, we're gonna talk about another tier 0 card. Palace of the Elemental Lords is an ultra rare field spell and arguably the best card in this entire set. The main reason for this is its first effect, which boosts the attack of all the owner's monsters by 200 for every different attribute in the owner's graveyard. That is insane. It doesn't sound that much. That boost can quickly go up to like 800, 1000 or even 1200 attack. And you can even change the attribute of one of your element servers in the graveyard to Divine. Yes, you can do that to actually get the attack boost up to 1400. Just imagine summoning a level 4 with like 1500 attack and it goes up to like 2900. That's ridiculous. But that's just only the first effect. Besides this, you can also add element sabber monsters from your deck to your hand by skipping your next battle phase. I wouldn't really recommend this effect unless you pull one of the stronger element sabber monsters like Molehu or Lapuila Mana. Also, giving your opponent basically one free turn isn't the greatest thing on a sneak peek. But the last effect allows you to send element sabber monsters from your deck to the graveyard instead of discarding them. Yes, this also thins your deck out, but if you use this effect wisely, it can be very, very powerful in combination with some of the quick effects that the element sabber monsters have. So yeah, the attack gaining effect is definitely why this card is so powerful, but not only. So overall, a must play card. This card is ridiculous. Next we have Restoration of the Monarchs, an equip spell that revives monsters with a very specific monarch typic stat line, 2400 attack or 2800 attack and 1000 defense. The first card in the set, Kaiden Kendo Spirit, is actually the only card that you can revive with this card, and sadly it's a pendulum monster, so getting it into the graveyard isn't the easiest task unless you discard it for a card effect. Also, it's summoned in defense, so you have to trip it or immediately use it for a link summon, otherwise this card isn't too great, but at least it's treated as 2 tributes for a tribute summon. And this obviously needs a lot of setup. I think if you can make it work, and if you can plan ahead, this card is good, but nonetheless this card is risky. Speaking of risky cards, Light of Sekka is the ultimate deal for you. You can draw 2 cards, but you cannot activate other spell and traps for the rest of the entire duel. You can also banish this card from your graveyard to shuffle a monster in your hand back into your deck and then draw one card. If you have a lot of powerful monsters like Decronate Buster and enough monster removal with your monsters alone, and you think you don't need spell and traps, then go ahead. I think it's worth the risk, but again, make sure you have enough monster removal because it really sucks to deck out against the Tindangle Trinity. Next we have Link Bound, a spell that recycles link monsters from your graveyard and also allows you to optimize your hand cards. Yes, technically this is a -1, but for a sneak this isn't too bad. You can get a strong link monster that you only drew once from your packs back into your extra deck, and you can probably get your win condition into your hand without risking to deck out earlier than your opponent. It's not a must play, but if you have, for example, Nightmare Phoenix or another powerful link monster and you want to have access to that card multiple times during a duel, then yes, this is a card you could play. Next up we have a continuous spell called Staring Contest. This card allows you to move monsters in certain columns every time a monster is summoned to the extra deck monster zone. The probably best use for this card would be to use it together with Space Insulator and put an opponent's monster through the Space Insulator link arrows so that its attack is reduced by 800. But overall the use of this card is very, very limited, so I would not recommend playing this. Next we have Called by the Grave, one of the best new cards from the set, at least when it comes to competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! You can banish a monster from your opponent's graveyard and negate its effects until the end of the next turn. This card is surprisingly useful on the sneak, especially against smaller monsters that can be special summoned from the graveyard like Defrag Dragon or some of the Trickster monsters. But there are also a lot of other smaller interactions against spell cards that revive monsters from the graveyard, for example. I mean, you could banish monsters from your opponent's grave to prevent Decronate Buster or the summon of Elemental Lord Phosphor Rage, or at least delay their summon somehow. Again, it's more about those smaller interactions than being like absolutely broken, completely interrupting your opponent's game. Or at least if you're still unsure about this card, then you probably want to side this in. Next we have the sneak promo card, Monster Reborn Reborn. You can choose 3 monsters in your grave, your opponent chooses 1 for you to special summon and the other ones are banished. Overall a very good card. Obviously your opponent won't give you your best monster, but it's still useful if you want to tribute summon or link summon afterwards. There's no reason not to run this card in my opinion. And now we come to the trap cards. The first one is called Limit Code and is one of the few cards that are completely useless on the sneak because there are simply no code talker monsters in the set. Next we have Red Reboot, one of the most hyped cards from the set, but on the sneak this isn't too great. Basically you can negate trap cards and your opponent cannot activate traps for the rest of the turn when you activate this, but your opponent's trap card is not destroyed but instead set to your opponent's spell and trap card zone so we can use it again next turn, and he also gets to add another trap card from his deck and sets it immediately with this effect. So I would only recommend using this card against a few really good trap cards. Probably the best use is to use this card against Waking the Dragon, because that's a very situational card. But besides that, again, there are only a few good cards that you can counter in the set, and this isn't too worth it. Oh, by the way, don't use this card from the hand. Paying 4,000 life points on the sneak just to activate this from the hand is not worth it. There's absolutely no reason to not set this card and activate it later on. Like, trust me, paying 4,000 life points is just not what you want to do. Next we have another useless card, Gorgon's End. This card can only be used in combination with a Tyndale Link monster, and obviously there are no Tyndale Link monsters in the set, so no. Next one, Atagai's Emu Elf is next. This card is a trap monster with respectable defense, 1400 attack and 1800 defense. Very playable card and a good way to get more monsters on the field for a tribute or link summon. I think this card is playable. And then we have World Legacy Awakens, which is a trap that allows you to link summon during your opponent's turn. This card is okay if you can make use out of the Nightmare Cerberus, Nightmare Phoenix, or even Nightmare Unicorn. Otherwise, this card has very limited use. I mean, in theory, you could use this card to dodge targeting removal by simply link summoning the target away. But again, unless you have those named Nightmare Link monsters to make use out of their on-summon effects to disrupt your opponent, this isn't really worth considering. Next we have spell and trap removal in form of World Legacy Struggle. You can destroy spell and traps up to the number of co-linked monsters on the field. Not a bad card by any means, but getting co-linked monsters on the field on a sneak is hardly possible. Probably the easiest way to do this is to use Trickster Plume together with cards like Space Insulator, but Backward Destruction isn't too strong in the sneak anyway, so you don't necessarily need this card. If you feel like you need it, then I would just simply recommend sliding this in. Next card is World Legacy Sorrow. When your opponent activates a card effect, a spell, trap or monster, then you can simply negate the activation under the condition that you control a co-linked monster. Again, controlling a co-linked monster on the sneak isn't too common, and if you have a lot of linked monsters and you feel like after a few duels on the sneak that you can do that, then I would recommend siding this in, but I don't think you're gonna use this card too often. Next is another ultra rare, Elemental Training. This card has 3 effects. First of all, Temple of the Elemental Lords you control cannot be destroyed by card effects and also cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects. That would mean that you have 2 ultra rares, which is very unlikely. And once per turn you can tribute one monster to special summon one element summon monster from your deck with a different original attribute from the monster tributed. Now this does not have a level restriction. You can even special summon out the level 6 straight from your deck, which is actually pretty powerful. In that case, I think this card is actually worth it, even though it thins out your deck. The last effect allows you to basically get Elemental Lord monster back from your graveyard. Now this effect isn't too useful. So unless you have some really powerful Element Summer monsters and a lot of Element Summers in general in your main deck, and you kind of want to get to the best one as fast as possible, I would not recommend playing this. But if you get insanely lucky and get a lot of these really powerful monsters, then yeah, this is worth considering. Next we have another useless card. The Sanctified Dark Lord obviously only works together with Dark Lord monsters, and there are not Dark Lord monsters in the sets. Let's go to the next card. The next card is Network Trap Hole, which is an ultra rare. This card can banish monsters that are special summoned from the deck or graveyard. The problem is most monsters on the sneak that are dangerous are summoned from the hand or from the extra deck. There are a few revival cards in the sneak that you can counter with this. This isn't a bad card by any means, but this is one of these cards that I would definitely advise you to side in if you realize that your opponent has, for example, World Legacy Succession, and it can make use out of its effect to special summon a very strong monster back from the graveyard. Then this is a good counter to it. Next up we have a secret rare, Infinite Impedance. So this card can negate the effect of one face-up monster, which is obviously very good against Tyndale Trinity. Also, if you activate this card on the field while it was set, it negates the effects of other spell and trip cards in the same column this turn, which is very powerful against your opponent's spell and trap cards. And also, if you control no cards, you can even activate this card from your hand even during your opponent's first turn. So overall, a very versatile and very good card. just by being able to counter Tinningle Trinity, this is 100% worth being played. This is a very, very good card. Yes, absolutely playable. So Heartless Drop Off, this is a counter trap that if a card on the field or in the graveyard is returned to the owner's hand, you can negate the activation of an effect that would do that and destroy that card. So there aren't too many cards that you can counter with this, and most of them are more or less mediocre. This card isn't bad by any means, but there isn't anything ridiculously crazy that you can counter with it. That's the problem. I would probably not recommend playing this. So right at the start from this guide, I told you there is a trap card in the set that can somehow deal with Tinningle Trinity, and it is a common. Well, Mame Maki is this card that I was referring to. So its effect is target one face-up monster your opponent controls, discard a card equal to that monster's level. And if you do, draw cards equal to the number of cards you discarded, then return that monster to the hand. So obviously you want to amass a lot of monsters on the field, enough to just finish the game off in one single attack. Before you do that, activate Mame Maki, discard a few cards, return Tinningle Trinity your opponent's hand, and simply finish the game from down. That's the plan that you want to use against people that have Tinningle Trinity if you cannot get over it. Yes, this is situational, but it is better than nothing. Yes, you have to keep a lot of cards in hand, and yes, you can deck out earlier, but this is one of the better cards against Tinningle Trinity. In fact, this card is so generic and also probably so common on the sneak that I'm not even sure if I would recommend playing this in the side deck. Maybe in some situations, you can even bounce back low-level monsters to prevent your opponent from going into a link summon. So this card is okay. You really have to activate this in the right situation to really make this card work to its full potential. And now we come to a card that I mentioned, I think, like 10 times during this guide, Waking the Dragon. You basically already know everything about this card. If this card is destroyed by your opponent or banished by your opponent, then you can special summon any monster from your deck or extra deck. Again, against your opponent's Zero Invaders, this card is ridiculous. Against your opponent Topologic Jusbane, this card is ridiculous. There are so many ways to kind of use this card on a sneak that I never would have thought that this card would actually earn the green border and be a tier 2 card. This card is dangerous. Yes, this is a short print, not everybody will have it, but that makes it kind of even more dangerous because after like 1 or 2 duels, people will completely forget about this card or will not think about this card in the first place because they did not watch this guide, unlike you did. But this is a dangerous card. If you skillfully use this card, then you can win a lot of games. Like, trust me, if you use this against your opponent's Zero Invader, they will probably rage quit. I'm already excited to use this card. I really hope I get it on the sneak peek to tell you my experience with it. So this card is dangerous. Obviously situational, but you can make it work. It's pretty cool. So now we come to the TCG exclusive, and sadly there's another card in the set that I don't have proper artwork for. The artwork for this card are multiple Ajama monsters. It's called Super Team Body Force. It's a secret rare, and you target one monster on the field and then special summon one monster from your hand, okay, for the same attribute but with different name. So basically this card allows you to revive more or less a monster from your graveyard or summon a monster from your hand. Probably the best synergy this card has is with Warriors, because there are a lot of Warrior monsters in the set with the Element Sabers and the Gokis. So reviving the level 6 Element Saber or a Goki Beer Hug is probably the best option that you can have for this card. And now we come to the Ventrit card. So this is Ventrit Executor, a level 8 ritual monster, which has actually some pretty decent stats with 3000 attack. There's only one big problem. There's only one ritual spell in this entire set, and that ritual spell has a downside that it blows the ritual monster up during the end phase of your opponent's next turn. There are other ways to summon this guy after you ritual summoned him, but those are so situational and require so much setup that I'm not sure if you really want to play this. I mean, sure, this card is powerful, but only for one turn. Like there's just too much drawback right there. Investing like 4 cards into the summon of this card for only one turn. So the only real use is the following. You ritual summon this, and then you can somehow banish this. For example, with Monster Reborn. And then use the next card, Ventured Anima, to revive it from the banished zone. That's kind of like the only good way, and honestly, this card is just not good enough. So here's Ventured Anima. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one of your banished Ventured monsters and special summon it. So again, this is the only good way to use this card. Yes, you can go into Vampire Sucker as a link monster, but that's not worth it. So next we have the Ritual Spell. Again, you can Ritual Summon Ventured monsters using this card's effect. Now, if you had 2 Ventured Executioners, you could send one from your deck to the graveyard to summon another one from your hand or graveyard and kind of have like a 1 or 2 card Ritual Summon. Maybe then this card is worth it. But besides that rare case where you have 2 Executioners ready in your deck, this card is not too great. Next up we have Ventured Nightmare. To all of you who have watched my review of the Ventured cards, you know how much I hate this. And gladly I can say this card is also absolute garbage on a sneak peek. Destroying your opponent's monster by battle and gaining 1000 attack with your ritual monster doesn't matter if it's destroyed during your opponent's end phase anyways, so 3000 attack is also already strong enough, so you don't need this card. The only good way to really make use out of this card is destroy your opponent's monster by battle with the ritual monster and then have another monster on your field that it gains the 1000 attack boost. But that again is so situational that it requires too much setup. And then we have the last card for the Ventured monsters, Ventured Daybreak. It's a common, and this card can blow up all cards on the field except the Ventured Ritual monster. Obviously this is removable, and if you can summon the Ritual monster, this is nice. The Ritual monster is destroyed anyways. If you can resolve this card and your opponent is in charge and has like the most monsters on the field, then sure, this card can actually be good. But like the other cards, this card requires so much setup, I would not recommend playing this. Next up we come to FA Dark Trackster. This card can be special summoned from your hand if you have a level 7 or higher FA monster on the field except FA Dark Trackster. There's only one other FA monster in the set, and it's a Synchro monster. You need one of the 2 tuners to summon that Synchro monster, and then you need that Synchro monster on the field, and then you special summon this from the hand. On summon, this card has 2100 attack, which is nice, and you can reduce its level by 3 or its attack by 900, and then you can destroy one card your opponent controls. That is obviously a strong effect. The main reason why this card has a red border is simply because it's so hard to summon. I mean, you need a Synchro first, which is already very hard to summon, and then you need this in the hand. Now, obviously, if you have multiple tuners and the FA Synchro monster and this card, then I think it's actually worth it. But besides that, don't play it. And here's FA Dawn Trackster. This is a decent 2100 attack, level 7 Synchro monster. There are 2 tuners in the set. Overall, this is decent. 2100 attack is not powerful enough to get over any level 4 monster, but all of them besides one. So also this card can negate spells and traps that your opponent activates by reducing its level by 2, which is okay because it still has like 1500 attack, which is okay, and 2000 defense is still also decent. So this is definitely a good monster if you have one of the tuners. Next up we have FA Winners. There is not a use for this card besides increasing the levels of your FA monsters, because every time you activate a FA spell or trap, their level is increased by 1. So their attack is also increased by 300. But besides that, this card doesn't have a use. Trust me, this card is just awful. I would not recommend playing this. Next up we have FA Death Feed, which is an insanely dangerous card to use because it's purely based on luck. In the best case, if FA Dawn Trackster battles, you can increase its attack by 1200. In the worst case, you destroy your own monster. Consider this, you invest a ton of resources into a Synchro monster, which is already good, and then you risk that Synchro monster to give it a 1200 attack boost. So this card is, in my opinion, way too risky to really make use out of it. Next we have a completely useless card. FA Overheat only works with FA monsters that you can special summon from hand. Dark Trackster cannot be summoned by this card, and also there are no FA field spells in the set, so there is no real use for this card. And now we come to 2 of the other Pendulum monsters in the set. Crystal Master is basically just a vanilla Pendulum scale. It doesn't really have an effect because there are no Crystal Beast monster in this set. So it's just a Pendulum scale 5, which is still fine because you can simply special summon or Pendulum summon level 4 or lower monsters from your hand. I would only recommend playing this card if you have at least like 2 or 3 other pendulum scales to really make use out of this card and actually use it for a pendulum summon, because the stats of this card are otherwise a little bit too weak. Next up we have Crystal Keeper. This card is even good if you cannot pendulum summon, because 1800 defense and 1500 attack are still pretty good stats for the sneak. But especially if you have multiple pendulum monsters and you can actually pendulum summon, this card becomes very powerful. So this is a very good card. When it comes to its effects, you cannot really use them because again there are no Crystal Beast monster in the set. Next up we have Flower Arcadian Moonflower, which is a synchro monster but nearly impossible to summon because you need 2 non-tuner monsters for a monster with just 2000 attack. Its effect doesn't really matter, but investing 3 monsters, which is at least 1 level 2 and 1 level 1, because all the tuners are level 3, just are too many weak monsters just to get us on the field. So I don't think you will actually make use out of this card. Maybe in combination with Waking the Dragon, but I doubt you will actually see this card on the sneak. Next up we come to Shadow Construct. The only way to summon this is to use 2 Tin Angle Trinities. Okay, who is sane enough to invest one of the best monsters in the entire set for a 1300 beat stack? Okay, nobody. Good. So next up we have Insector Pico Farena, which requires 2 insect monsters, which is nearly impossible to get off, and this card is just useless and you don't have to consider playing it. Its stats and its effect also don't matter. The same thing also counts for Madolche Fresh Sistart, which is also a link monster that requires 2 Madolche monsters. There are no Madolche effect monsters in the set, so you cannot summon this. And the last 2 cards, Rainbow Reflection and Crystal Conclave, are also both Crystal Beast of Port cards, so there are no Crystal Beast monsters in the set, so we cannot make use out of this card. So that's it, my review of all 100 cards from the set. As always, I really hope you enjoyed this guide and you learned something. I wish you all very good luck for the sneak, that you pull the best cards possible, the best monsters, and I would really like to hear your thoughts after you went to the sneak. Did this guide help? How can I improve it? Did I miss something? If you have questions, simply ask me in the comments. And obviously, please share this video, like this video, subscribe to this channel, because this video was a ton of work. I cannot bring this guide to you if there is no interest in it, and most of my guides that I did so far had less and less interest, so I really hope this one blows up again like the other ones did, so I can continue bringing you these awesome guides for the sneak peek. Okay, but that's it for today. Again, good luck on your sneak peek, and till next time. Bye.